Okay, so we're going to do both shamatha and vipassana tonight, since this is the topic of the chapter that we're covering. And if you take a good posture, the most important feature of posture is to have a straight back. And to that end, you want your knees to be no higher than your hips, and ideally lower. And you want to be comfortable. And check your body for tension, maybe your lower belly. Let it relax. Your neck, especially. These are just the highlights. Your shoulders. And then your face. Sometimes we hold tension in the forehead and let it go. In the eyes, cheeks, mouth. Your eyes are open and they're aimed down at the ground at about a 45-degree angle, more or less. Very relaxed, natural gaze. And we're going to start with shamatha practice. So, actually, you could have your eyes closed for this, or open, as you wish. The downside to closed eyes is that it's more likely to put you to sleep. But we won't be doing it for that long. And become aware of the breath as it comes in through your nostrils, comes down your chest, your belly expands, your belly contracts, the breath comes up again, it exits your nostrils and goes out into the space. And you can feel it as it goes in and out of your nostrils. As it comes in, it's perhaps a little cooler than when it goes out. If you wish, you can count, but I think maybe tonight we won't count. We'll just be aware of the breath. It's very precise, simple, direct. You're aware of the breath coming in, going out, back and forth, and we'll just do that for a few minutes. When thoughts arise, you see them, and as you see them, you can let them go, and you come back to the simplicity and restful quality of the breath. As it comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. It's very restful and very precise. So if you're having thoughts, you just let them evaporate, and you become aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. Very simple. Okay, and now open your eyes. Have a very natural gaze, not swimmy, not focused, down at the ground at about 45 degrees. And you're aware of the space of this room in the same way that you were aware of the breath. It's just the space now. And if you wish, you can be aware of the breath going out into the space like a line, dissolving, and at the end of the out-breath, there's just this space. So bring your awareness into the space of this room. Let it relax. And the breath comes up, goes out, exiting your nostrils, dissolving as it goes. And at the end, there's just a pause. And then again, the breath comes up, goes out into the space, dissolving. And at the end, we're just right here in the space of this room. And repeat. So whatever thoughts you might be having, just let them go. Come back to this space, either with the breath going out into it and dissolving, or just resting in the space, as you prefer. So whatever thoughts you're having, just see them. Don't have to do anything more than that. And you come back and rest in this space. So if you'd like to stand up, stretch, you're welcome to. So, the subject for tonight is chapter 44 of the Profound Treasury. It's called Picking and Choosing, Beyond Picking and Choosing, Beyond Picking and Choosing, which is a description of Vipassana. Vipassana meditation is really the most profound of the two types of meditation we do as Buddhists, of awareness practice, you might say. Shamatha has to do with developing the ability to focus the mind on an object. In the case of shamatha, it's the breath, usually, although it could be anything. TM, transcendental meditation, is shamatha. Anything you do in a yoga studio is usually shamatha. And the idea is to be able to rest the mind on an object, the breath, but it can be space too. And then in resting the mind on it, you actually rest. And you achieve a kind of simple focus, a simple awareness of the object of meditation, whatever you take as your object. The object can be something very small, like a candle flame or a mantra, and it could be something as vast as the space of this room or of the world. Just this open space. And yet, it's still being taken as an object. And so when we take it as an object, we are resting our mind. And the virtues of shamatha, the secondary virtue is that we begin to see to what extent our thoughts interrupt our awareness. The main virtue is that we are developing the ability to rest in a focused way on something that is present, in the present moment. And it's a combination of learning how to rest and be aware. So this is the main virtue of shamatha, this kind of focused awareness. Focused on what? On an object. It might be a little object, it might be a big object. Vipassana takes it to another level. And in fact, Vipassana meditation, which means Vipassana in Tibetan, the word is hlak tong. And hlak means superior, and tong means seeing, so it's superior seeing. And what it means is that we are not just taking an object, but rather what we are doing is we're coming back to awareness, which is with us all the time, which is our fundamental nature. And that awareness is not something that's inside, which we direct out. It's everywhere. It's in the space. So when we come back to that awareness, we're coming back to the reality of this present moment, plain and simple. And we do it with that kind of focus that we have developed in shamatha. So we're combining the two. We're combining the focus of shamatha with the awareness practice, superior seeing practice of vipassana. Why is it superior seeing? It's because we're actually aware of what is real. And what we are doing is and this is why the chapter of this, the title of this chapter is called Beyond Picking and Choosing. We are letting go of any kind of commentary. The commentaries are always evaluative, good and bad, this as opposed to that, picking and choosing. And we're just letting go. That's all trivial stuff. It's just the sound of a magpie. I like this, I don't like that. You just let it go. And in the letting go of that, you become able, one does, to see things stripped of our commentary, which is to say, as they actually are, beyond our thoughts of good and bad. So, he says that this seeing is Hlak Tong is seeing in a special or superior way. It's without ambition or ego-centered projects. Ego-centered projects always have the thought in them of me and what am I going to get out of this? And we just let that go. It's just a distraction. And without categorizing as good and bad, or bad. And we see whatever there is to be seen, the 6 knowables, objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental events, as they are. So categorization, this is good, that's bad, this is better, that's worse, that's replaced by awareness. And we never let go of the shamatha element. The shamatha element is the ability to rest in awareness in an undistracted way for however long. It might just be a moment. But it has that quality of rest and of continuity. There is, you're familiar perhaps with the 4 reminders. There are different sets of reminders that are used as contemplations. One of them goes like this. See if I can get it right. Non-conceptual awareness. Non-conceptual awareness is the basis for all states of samadhi. Samadhi means vipassana. It means unbroken vipassana. So a non-conceptual awareness. You see, that's what, that non-conceptual awareness, that's shamatha. It's no concepts. You're just aware. It's not broken. You're not distracted. So non-conceptual awareness is the basis for all states of samadhi. Like a fertile field. It's like a fertile field in which things can grow. That non-conceptual awareness, that's what we cultivate. That's the shamatha. Coming back to this simple, clear, uninterrupted for however long, it might just be a second, it might be a long time. This resting in awareness, this non-conceptual awareness is the basis for all states of samadhi, meaning all states of vipassana, like a fertile field. Now vipassana, this awareness of the present moment, of reality, of what's real, what's happening now. This is what takes us out of the false mistakes of beliefs, of confusion and egotism, and into the perception of the world as it really is, reality. So sometimes people wonder, well, what's the difference between vipassana and shunyata meditation, or vipassana and mahamudra meditation, or vipassana and great perfection meditation, which gets more and more exalted. Mahamudra and great perfection are really about just different versions of the same thing. Vipassana is the same as all of those. It's just a matter of how much we have begun to realize by resting in this space about the nature of reality. If we're still thinking in terms of I and other, then we're still at the level of vipassana. It's kind of hinting on a level. But once we begin to really get into this open awareness, then things start to come clear, the teachings start to come clear, that we've we've contemplated and thought about and studied the teaching of egolessness, that I doesn't exist, that I is just a fiction, or as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, a lie that is told, and that what is real is this, beyond any statement of I or other. And then we're beginning to practice shunyata meditation. Shunyata, emptiness meditation. Empty of what? Empty of the belief in I and the belief in other, and everything that constellates around those two beliefs, which is all the dramas of the relationships between I and other. All of that evaporates, and we begin to realize that this present moment is what is actually real. And then we're stepping into emptiness meditation, shunyata meditation. And it goes beyond that into the Vajrayana with Mahamudra and Chögyam, and increasing realizations. So really the difference that distinguishes these meditations, Vipassana, Shunyata, Mahamudra, Chögyam, is what is the realization that comes along with that meditation on space, that identification with the space of this present moment. Yes, I see some grins. Let me see what he says here that I'm missing. It says you're developing a higher level of awareness. That's Vipassana. Call it higher. He puts higher in quotes. Seeing things just as they are. He says accepting and rejecting are not removed. You see, that would be very crude if we just try to get rid of them, like smash them and excoriate them. He says, but they're nullified or neutralized by our increasing awareness that this is what's real and that this is what we can come back to. And he says, you're not trying to make yourself a zombie by stopping thinking these things, but you are more capable, actually, of handling your life because you don't have so many emotional reactions. You're not as upset. You're not picking and choosing. He says, you remove the subtle consciousness associated with liking and disliking by means of meditation practice. And this produces more equilibrium. You become calmer and more confident. He says, we're going back to shamatha, that begins with the practice of labeling thoughts thinking. And so the thoughts are of less value to you. You simply see them as thoughts, and you don't become so involved with the thoughts. You don't see them as bad or good thoughts. You cut the thought, and then the next one doesn't come up right away. He says, when you begin to catch thoughts as they arise, they do not have a chance to get to the level of love and hate, so they don't plant further karmic seeds or debts. They don't create that kind of momentum as much. He says labeling thoughts thinking, if we do that, begins to nullify karma altogether. See, karma is this forward momentum that is contained within believing in our thoughts. That person, that so-and-so, they said this to me, I'm going to get even, I'm going to go do this. And then that's our karma. We're bound into this story that we tell ourselves, how coming out of the emotion, the I and the other, it's all in thought. So when we begin to practice shamatha, we begin to cut the karmic chain. Then he talks about Vipassana as being a post-meditation experience. This is almost ironic to call it post-meditation. You see, shamatha is done ideally on the cushion, and Vipassana is done ideally in daily life. Now you can do them both. Well, shamatha you should do on the cushion. But Vipassana can be done on the cushion or in daily life. But really where it's most powerful is in daily life. If we can come back to that open, clear awareness in the course of as we walk down the street, as we talk to a friend. This is interesting. He says, sitting practice is not the result of karma. It's a fresh start. It's like you cut the karmic chain by cutting thought, and you get a fresh start. So he says, so Vipassana definitely has to be combined with shamatha. With shamatha, you cut the karmic chain. With vipassana, you see reality beyond good and bad, beyond the commentary, beyond the thoughts of which are evaluative. He says, with awareness in your system, you begin to accomplish what is called vipassana heedfulness, or vipassana awareness. And out of that, you begin to develop continual samadhi. Samadhi means like an unbroken state of awareness. The stillness that comes from being able to communicate with the fundamental goodness of the world. When we begin to drop good and bad, then we begin to communicate with, we begin to come in touch with what he calls, in the Shambhala teachings, basic goodness, which is that this world is fundamentally of value in and of itself for no reason. That it's fundamentally worth being here for. It's fundamentally valuable. And we begin to become in touch with that through the practice of vipassana especially. He says, you see that the world is neither for you nor against you. The world is workable. It's no longer problematic. Nor is it extremely helpful. This does not turn people into zombies. He keeps saying this. You don't turn into some kind of a trance state person. It turns people into Buddhas. Vipassana develops into post-meditation. It's all over the place, he says. A city is living vipassana. It's like we go out into New York, it's just living vipassana. So you're not graduating from shamatha. Shamatha is the basic discipline of how you handle yourself in sitting practice, while vipassana is how you handle yourself in post-meditation experiences. Vipassana is the experience of synchronizing the senses. When we come back into this open spatial awareness, it's without effort. All the senses are synchronized. Sound, smell, taste, touch. You should practice vipassana in all your daily activities, no matter how mundane. And then when you do this, and you're in touch now with this fundamental sort of worthwhileness of the world, then whatever you do is sacred. And he says by sacred action, we don't mean magical or God-ridden, but shamatha vipassana-ridden. So please pay attention to everything, he says. This is so sweet. So please pay attention to everything. We are overcoming our personal likes and dislikes, which is so much a part of me. I. A particular person. John, Lane, Kevin, CT. We have this, we think of ourselves as me, I, my hopes, my fears, my likes, my dislikes. And really what this is doing is it's overcoming this. That whole sort of persona is being jettisoned. And that doesn't mean that we become homogenized, because every person is unique in their particular characteristics. But what we're jettisoning is those hopes and fears, the likes and the dislikes, the judgments, that this is good and that's bad, that we have been carrying around for so long, and they're so stale in us. He says, liking and disliking are purely the result of our passion and aggression. There is no intrinsic logic to liking or disliking beyond that. One's passion and aggression. Through vipassana, you can experience the vastness of the world versus being self-centered in your own little world. But there is a great loss. There's this loss of the familiarity of me. It's something that has to be given up. And that could be painful or scary even, because we're giving up this little me that we've carried around for so long. He says we can actually reduce samsaric possibilities and free ourselves from future karma. And then, this is a classic one that he says, if we are able to work with situations properly and effectively, if we're able to practice this, we can block the possibility of being born in the lower realms and then the higher realms as well, which means we're not going to be born into neurotic, fearful, blissful, arrogant, frightened, hateful states. We're going to be awake. Finally, we can be born in Sukhavati. Sukhavati is the land of bliss. It's the land of Amitabha, the bodhisattva of compassion. And what it means to be born in Sukhavati, it's not like you're going to go to heaven, like some kind of, with lambs gambling and people playing harps and, that whole thing. It's really that you begin to see the world as being fundamentally worth being here for. And not only that, but you've achieved a kind of calmness and intelligence and kindness, prajna and compassion. And that's what characterizes Sukhavati. He says we might even attain enlightenment. That's always possible. And then he finally says, but we really have to earn it. We ourselves have to do it. That is what is meant by non-theism. Nobody is going to save you. You have to do it yourself. And I'm impressed by the impersonal quality of this path, that we're really giving up this very personal me-ness with my hopes and fears and my desires and my feelings that things have to be this way and they can't be that way, because sooner or later they're going to wind up being that way to one degree or another. And if we have lived multiple lives, maybe to every degree. But even in this life, we're constantly being subjected to a confounding of what we thought our lives were going to be. It becomes something other than. Especially, speaking for myself, as old age sets in. And, a friend of mine said, did you ever think we'd be this old? No, you didn't. You didn't. And then one day you wake up and you're, my God, you're 75 years old. I'm 74. And how did that happen? When did it go by like that? And then you look at and what it's doing to you. It's just tons of things that it's doing. It's not just physical. It's mental. It's situational. What you're capable of, the way in which one's capable of living in the world. But it's not just old age, it's everything. There are the four main sufferings. What are they? Birth, sickness, old age, and death. Even birth is painful. Trungpa Rinpoche described it, and I always thought birth must be painful because you're being forced down the birth canal, right? That's got to be painful. He said something completely different. What he said was that we keep finding a nice, safe, secure situation. It's like we're in the womb and we're floating around in the amniotic fluid and it's all nice and we're comfortable. And then it changes. We didn't want it to change. We were happy the way it was. But now it's changing. And we're being propelled into a new situation, out of the womb, that womb that we had, and into a situation, and all of a sudden it's cold and it's dry, and we have a whole new set of problems, that we have to cope with and deal with. And that's painful. And that's happening again and again and again throughout our lives, that situation of birth. From one comfortable situation into another situation that is uncomfortable until we make it comfortable and then we're propelled out of that one. So even birth, much less sickness, old age, and death. Everybody knows that those are painful. So it's really interesting. It's so important that we begin to understand this principle of shamatha and vipassana. And shamatha is so good. It's not just a beginning practice. It allows us to rest in awareness. It's the key. Shamatha literally means abiding in peace. That's the meaning of the word in Sanskrit and in Tibetan. Shine in Tibetan. Ne means to dwell in or abide in, and shi is shiva, peace. So we abide in peace. And why is it peaceful? It's peaceful because we're letting go of thought, which is so full of Sturm und Drang, pain. So, complaints? Questions? Refutations?
I was thinking about...
Take the mic here.
Okay.
Terry's going to give you the mic.
I was thinking about what you said about that shamatha is for the cushion and then vipassana is for when you're out in the world. But I thought that there is an element of shamatha when you're out in the world, you know, that you have the recognizing of the awareness and the feeling and being, but at some point,
well said.
shamatha can bring you back to a start.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
We never let go of shamatha, all the way, because it becomes an element of the vipassana. It becomes that smoothness, that relaxation, that continuity of the vipassana, the shamatha. That's the shamatha element. It never goes away. It never does. And Rinpoche, I don't know, he used to stress that a lot. There were T-shirts, and there was one that said, if you lose your mind, come back. They're giving it at seminary. Another one said, never forget the Hinayana. You know, that's where you practice shamatha, right?
Uh-huh.
The Hinayana especially. I don't know. But shamatha becomes an element of the vipassana. You don't drop it. You can't. It provides that rest, that continuity, that smoothness to the awareness, you know? Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Please, Hugo.
I think along the lines of shamatha as a point of concentration, I feel that people, when I talk to people about meditation who don't meditate and haven't studied, and you know, I get this thing a lot where people will be like, oh, you know, running is my meditation, you know, bike riding is my meditation, playing an instrument is my meditation, I like to add snowboarding is my meditation, you know, stuff like that. And the thing that I think that what people are probably trying to get at without having the vocabulary or really for it is that when you do have a point of focus that really requires your attention to the point where you're no longer worried about the future or thinking about the past, but you're very focused in the moment on something. It could be crocheting or whatever. I feel like that is an experience of a form of shamatha, and some of that rest that we talk about, that you're talking about, is sort of inherent in that. Again, it's unwitting shamatha, right? It's
Right.
And I think that's why we love these activities that we do. That's why we love, you know, whatever it is, sailing or something.
Flow states.
Yeah, flow states, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
art creation and music creation are good examples.
Right.
But it could be yoga, it could be all kinds of stuff.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
And I want to add that Trungpa Rinpoche felt that the problem with using your running, your swimming, your crocheting, he said, is the entertainment aspect. Meditation has to be boring, because what you're doing is you're letting go of those nasty, repetitive, irritating thoughts, you know? And he talked about boredom being so essential in meditation, and it starts out, boredom is hot. But the more you begin to be able to rest, you know, and allow thoughts to come and go and just let them go, boredom becomes cooler. And he talks about you have to get to this the stage of cool boredom.
Could I just ask too, do you think that is, so, you know, another form of shamatha, a common form of shamatha is chanting, right? Mantras. And do you think that maybe mantras are a better example? Do you think that's, so is that a good form of shamatha because it, again, is because it's a repetitive thing that boredom is able to sneak in there a lot easier than if you're skiing or snowboarding or something?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The problem is with skiing and snowboarding is that there's an entertainment value, like, I'm a great snowboarder. I'm a good skier, you know? Look at me. You know, I mean, and with almost any sport like that, there's that quality of feedback to your ego. And it's very, very subtle. You know, I mean, you don't tend to notice it. Sorry. Somebody's calling. And so that's why it's just good to, you know, you can definitely bring a meditative approach to those activities. It's great to do. But don't make it the only thing you do, the only kind of meditation. You know, it's you still need to be sitting on the cushion and encountering the boredom of watching the breath, you know, because then you begin to see your thoughts, you let them go, you know, the repetitive, irritating quality of monkey mind. And that's, you can achieve a kind of relief from that by calling your running or your skiing or your whatever it might be. I used to be a technical rock climber, you know, and there were guys who were amazing. I remember this one guy, Skip Guerin. He was probably about a 20-year-old kid, and he was thin and wiry and light. And I used to watch him bouldering. Bouldering is when you get up on rocks that you can theoretically jump down from, and you do really, really, really hard problems. And I used to watch him just flow. I mean, he was like quicksilver moving, you know, across the rock. It was beautiful to watch, beautiful. You know, it's a form of meditation, but it's not enough in itself, because the boredom aspect isn't there. You know, he's getting all kinds of internal and external feedback about what a great climber he was, and he was, you know, and he's also getting the pleasure of solving the problems, you know, that would come up as he goes through each little problem. So, yeah.
It's good for relaxation, but not good for awareness.
Well, I think, for instance, where did I come across this recently? Somebody wants to involve us, either here or up in Westchester, with a new project to teach martial arts in a meditative way. It's great. I mean, of all the sort of physical exercises, perhaps martial arts is even more akin to meditation than, say, running, you know, or weightlifting or something like that. Certainly it comes out of the samurai tradition, which had a lot of Buddhist awareness ethic in it, you know. The whole idea of being completely fearless, being essential to being a good samurai. You know, if you had any notion of fear or macho or bravery, you were not going to be a good samurai. You had to be absolutely right there on the point, right? So but even then, you know, the quality of entertainment. I mean, you're not going to be entertained when you're sitting on a cushion watching your breath. It doesn't last long, does it? Yeah. But you can be entertained for a long time, rock climbing or doing karate, or, I mean, that's endless as you get better and better, and, you know, become a 6 dan or a 7 dan or whatever you become, your rank. You know.
It's a really rich fantasy.
Which is?
Achievement, sports achievement like that. You know, there's a fantasy quality to it. You know, how you are projecting a story as you progress through, achieving a task that you've not done before. And I always felt that way in sports. There was the sort of a hero. You were a hero of something.
Exactly.
You know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I loved it. And
you loved it?
Oh yeah.
What was your sport?
Who doesn't? Oh, lots. Football, baseball, basketball, tennis, all those things. One thing I did like about it that I still carry with me, and it came to mind when you were talking about Vipassana, is that complete awareness in space. And I got this from field sports mostly, and basketball. Basketball mostly because I was a guard, and it's knowing everything that's on the court, and you had to kind of view it without passion. You know, it was really a great touch for feeling the world, and I still think of that when I'm in a Vipassana state. You know, of what's going on in space, all things in space, before an action is taken. So I had to share that. I had to share that.
You know, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing it. And you reminded me that heroism aspect. You get a lot of that in rock climbing. You know, I mean, I lived in Boulder, Colorado, and every day after work, you know, we'd head down to El Dorado Springs, which was 7 miles south of the city limits, and cliffs ranging from 7 or 8 to 900 feet. You know, and you could climb there till dark. And we did. And then we would rappel off in the dark sometimes at 9 o'clock at night, you know. And then what you do is when you come off is you go to a bar and you sit around with a bunch of guys, and each one of them is telling the story of their heroic episode on the cliffs. And nobody wants to listen to anybody else. Everybody wants to get a chance to tell their story about how then I made this gnarly move, and, you know, and it was really, there was this manky bolt, and there's this whole, you know, the climbing lingo, and nobody's listening to anybody else. Everybody just wants to be a hero. Yeah, it's true. A lot of egotism in it. But try getting any egotism, any ego feedback sitting on your cushion, you know, hour after hour, watching your breath.
You're really sitting well.
Oh, yeah. Right. That'll go a long way.
John, did you say that karma is eradicated in Vipassana? Because that doesn't seem quite right to me. I could see that, unlike shamatha, when a thought arises in Vipassana, it doesn't seem to oppose awareness. It's just part of the field. But still, the very fact that a thought arises, isn't that a karmic seed sprouting? Maybe you can elaborate a little more.
You know, I mean, it's going to take, you know, a fair amount of work, depending on the individual. But the idea of cutting thought by labeling it thinking, you know, if you label it thinking, you don't have to label it thinking, you can just cut it too. But if you want to be sort of heavy-handed, then you label it thinking, you literally say thinking. And what you're doing is you're jettisoning that thought. You're saying, bye-bye, you know, that thought. Well, those thoughts are where karma inheres. Nowhere else. They're the karma takes place, or takes, it manifests fully in your thoughts. And, you know, these are like the 12 nidanas. You know, they're mental events that proceed in a chain. And when you begin to say, oops, thinking, and you let it go, you're cutting that karmic chain. Now, that doesn't mean you're getting rid of karma, because it's coming out of the alaya. You know, it's your storehouse. You've got it there stored in you, and you haven't emptied it out yet. They say that you cut the karmic chain, and this is so Buddhist, in 81 grades. The way in which you do it is by bringing it to awareness, just what we're talking about. You bring that thought to awareness. And when you bring it to awareness, you're cutting the karmic force. If you don't bring it to awareness, you're just wrapped up in the thought, and you're caught in, and the karma is just rolling forward, right? But as soon as you say, oops, I'm thinking, and you come back into this empty space of the present moment, you've cut the karmic chain. And what they say is that you can read, I always recommend this book, Thich Nhat Hanh's book.
Understanding our mind. Understanding our mind.
Understanding Our Mind. Thank you. Got it. I never remember the title. It used to be called Transformation at the Base. And the base, you see, is the alaya. And the way in which you transform it at the base is that as those thoughts come out of the alaya, and that's where they come from, they come up in your mind. The alaya is constantly churning out stuff. Sometimes it's triggered by external events, like you see somebody who reminds you of somebody you knew in the past, and suddenly that you have an association and you project that onto this person. But a lot of times the alaya is just kicking it out, like in dreams, or when you're meditating, and suddenly a thought comes up out of nowhere, that has no continuity. And then you see it, you bring it to awareness, and in doing that you let it go. And by doing that you burn it. And you burn your thoughts in 81 grades, they say. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this. It goes strong, 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 medium, strong, strong, weak, strong, medium, strong, strong, medium, medium. I don't know how you get 81 out of that, but you sounds to me like you get more like about, how many? 20? No, 27, I think.
Yeah, okay.
But there's another way you get 81, supposedly. And you can see the idea is you just keep slowly wearing it away by bringing it to awareness. It's the only way to do it. And it's cutting karma.
Yes, that's a little more clear.
Huh?
That's a little more clear, thanks.
Yeah, good. And at some point, we begin to wake up. I remember Lama Chögyam. He's a teacher, he's a translator, and he's actually a Rinpoche. He's a Kenpo. That means he's graduated from the Shedra, Nyingma. And he's so modest, he calls himself a Lama, right? As his name is Lama Chögyam. He just won't use the title Kenpo. And but he told a friend of mine when he was giving refuge and he was meeting with each individual, to give them their refuge name and get a feeling for who they were before the ceremony. And he met with this friend, and the friend told me afterwards, he told him, Lama Chögyam said, you have to lose your personal identity. I mean, that's fierce. That's really something.
And he lived in America?
Lama Chögyam?
Yeah.
He lives in Ashland, Oregon, with his partner, Sange Khandro. Sange is an American woman, and they're both translators, and they're both just amazing translators. Especially Sange, you see, is probably one of the finest oral translators in the world. I don't know how she does that. Khenpo Namdrol, who I've been studying with for 15 years, won't teach Americans without Sange being there, because he won't teach in English. His English, he feels, isn't good enough he needs more precision when he's teaching Dharma. He'll talk to people over lunch in English, but when he's teaching, and he won't teach in translation without Sange, the only person. She went to India when she was 18, and she's been a translator ever since. And she's a terrific practitioner. She teaches Chöd and other subjects, and she studied with the Nakpas, in India, people who smear their bodies with ashes and all that stuff. And she's a piece of work. You should meet. I'd love for you to meet her. She reminds me of Mata Hari. Do you remember there was a comic strip years ago called Terry and the Pirates? Nobody remembers that? It's about a guy who was a B-29 bomber pilot and for Chiang Kai-shek, in the late 1940s. This was a comic strip. And in it, there's this villainous woman. What's her name? The tiger lady, or dragon lady, and she was just fierce. And that's what I think of Sangye. Only it's all about the Dharma. She's just a fierce practitioner for the Dharma, and a dear friend of mine and of other people of Westchester. Love to get her in. She and Chenam used to come east because they were students of Tinley Norbo. Yeah, but then he died, and he had a place up in Dalhousie, New York. They used to come here, and they would teach in New York. But now they don't come east. More of our loss.
Was that cartoon based on a true story of any kind? Because it sounded, the story of there was recently a guy, I read an obituary of a guy who was flying for Chiang Kai-shek, but working for the CIA back in the day, and so it's an adventure story.
Did the CIA even exist back then?
Yeah.
Yeah, God, that's amazing. But I don't think Terry and the Pirates was real, but it was certainly based on a real situation. There were Americans, pilots, who were flying for Chiang Kai-shek against the communists.
Right. And with this particular guy was doing that, but at the same time filling a political agenda for the states who was behind Chiang Kai-shek at the time.
Yeah. Well, the States was behind Chiang Kai-shek, and General George Marshall went to China to try and help Chiang Kai-shek out, and that was a failure. And
I had one question about the noticing. How much do you notice? I mean, to thought, coming to realizing that you're thinking, you've been drawn away. How much of a texture do you get of the thought? Is it just to notice that you're away? I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of France. I don't even say France, I just come back. Or do I get some texture for what it was so that I...
The texture of the thought?
Yeah, texture of the thought so that I burn through it. You know what I'm saying? Is there some... Does that make any sense, or is that something I'm making up?
I think at some point it begins to become very rich and full of texture. But you can't court it. Okay. The only way for that to happen is that you have a regular practice. I think regularity is the key, and then it just happens in fits and starts, especially, at least in my experience, and maybe I'm just a beginner, in this phase of it. But definitely having a regular practice, ideally a half an hour a day or more, is so important, so key. And then it will happen. And you don't have to make it happen, And especially it happens in the interplay between the difficulty of life situations that arise for you, which can be very frightening, painful, scary, or that, and your sitting practice. And study is important too, that you be studying. That's why it's such a gift to be a teacher, frankly, because it makes you study. Really. Yes, he's teaching. I would like each one of you, both of you guys, you've been around long enough to start teaching something. You will find that you learn way more than anybody else in the room.
It'll come.
Huh?
It'll come.
It's and the combination of that study and then the regular practice, and the hardest part of it is the regular practice. But that's really... for years I didn't have a regular practice. I'd practice in fits and starts. And I'm confessing. And it's so important. Trungpa Rinpoche just went at us and at us and at us. And he kept saying, just do it, it works. He would say. Got to get it routinized and Yeah. It's really funny. And our lives are going to force us. It's so... I'm finding, the end of life is such a challenge. It really is. It's interesting, and it ain't just me either who says this. Okay. Should we end? Should we dedicate the merit? It's in that last page of the chat thing there. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Skip the middle verse. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you.